We're live. If for anyone that's on there listening and has been waiting, I apologize. This is the first time I've done a kind of webinar on Riverside, and it wasn't as straightforward as I was hoping. So apologies for my lateness, but we're going to jump in and we're just going to see how it goes. Okay, so it looks like there's a chat. I just don't see any of the people in my room. So if you have anything that you want to share or ask, get in the chat. I think that's the primary way I'm going to interact with you, although I'd like to see your faces. This is the first time. Just bear with us. It'll get better each time as we go. So I will be more prepared next time. So yeah, the chat is live and I can see you. Jesse, thank you for checking in. And I'm just going to get into the material. Essentially, what I want to do with these webinars is to share more of this work that I've been doing and developing for the last 25 years or so. And I'll share a little bit about kind of where it comes from. And then I'm going to do a little bit of a slideshow here. But what I want to start with, for anyone that is interested in kind of participating and giving some material to work with, is what I don't love is when people talk about work and then they kind of set themselves up with like, just like easy, like T-ball, right? It's all kind of like set up for them and then they hit the ball out of the park and wow, that's so great. I'm much more interested in like getting real difficulties and challenges from life and then seeing how those challenges actually make more sense and can be addressed in a more fundamental way through this work that I do. And so if there's anything that you came for, if there's anything that you would like to see or hear about, or especially if there are communication and relationship struggles or things that you just feel like you can't quite figure out or that you think there's a solution for, but most of the people talking about it don't quite get to the heart of it, these are the kinds of things that I would love to hear. So get in the chat, share anything about why you came, where you're coming in from, and specifically any challenging relational dynamics, communication dynamics, things that people have been struggling with for eons, and I really have a sense that what I've created can get at all that stuff in a really good way, in a complete way. So, no big deal. I just solved the universe, but here we are. So thank you for being with me. Jesse, thank you. Lizzie, thanks for getting in the chat. Sherry, thanks for getting in the chat. I'm going to jump in. Can everyone see the kind of slide? It should be the breakthrough experience, communication that changes everything. Excellent. You can see it. And yeah, we're going to jump in as we go again. Please participate. Please participate. Please get involved. Ask questions. Push back. And there'll be some time at the end where I can get to some of the material you give me here at the beginning, so that, again, you're going to share some difficulties, challenges, hard things. I'm going to share about the model that I've created. And then at the end, we're going to see how do those things interact? How do these really challenging relational and communication struggles that we have interact with this unique approach that I've created? So all that to say, let's jump in. Jess says Jess has Riverside open on another tab, but I think that's fine because we're in the same spot. Wait a second. Why did Jess just took the screen? Can you guys still see me, or has that changed?
I don't want that. Can you hear me, Dolphin?
What just happened there? Hold on 1 second.
I didn't want the screen.
Oh, Jess. Oh, you're okay. I think you're inside with me for some reason. Let me see if I can't.
I can leave.
Well, I want you to be here. Everyone else is in another room somehow.
Oh, well, let me see. Should I close it and start over? I'll do that.
Okay, yeah, I think you just requested to come on live.
I'll close all of them, yeah.
Sure. But come back on. You'll be able to hear, and then at the end, people who want to get on with me can click that call in button.
Okay, all right.
Cool. Again, just technical difficulties. Okay, we're gonna start. All right. So I don't know who loves Carl Jung. I love Carl Jung. He has this quote, I'm sure we've all heard it: until you make your unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And I wanted to just provide a really quick definition for the unconscious. And this will hopefully make more and more sense as we go into the material of the model that I created. To me, the unconscious is where everything that shows up in life that we say no to goes. So in other words, if there are experiences, pain, difficult interactions, if there are things like that in which we are not open to it, we're not available to it, we don't get the love and care we need, so we don't figure out how to include it, the intelligence of life just saves it for us. It goes into this unconscious space that we don't have to face or feel or interact with, but it's still there and it's still operating. And that's why so many of us, if we have difficulties in relationship, it seems like life is kind of like throwing these old unresolved things at us in the form of relationships and our relational difficulties. And that's because the unconscious is behind the scenes orchestrating things so that we can re-experience things from the past. And I'm going to get into why that is and why that's actually really helpful as we go. Jessica, you're back with me, but it's okay. I'm just going to turn your microphone off. Okay, so as we get into personal development, we'll start to feel a sense of, okay, I can kind of see things more clearly now. But there often is this sense that as we engage, as we start to do things with our difficult pieces, with our unresolved pieces, is that we're kind of efforting but not getting anywhere. And one of the reasons is because that it starts slow. I think the results of healing and integrative work doesn't happen like really, really fast all of a sudden, generally. It happens where we're doing little things over and over and over again, and slowly but surely we start to see changes in our life. But the other reason it can feel slow is that we haven't really been shown or taught, how do I get to the heart of the things that actually make the biggest difference? And so that's what I hope we get into a little bit today. Now, at the heart of the work that I do is attachment. Now, I have a slightly different way of kind of defining and interpreting attachment, but it's a really articulate way to understand how our early experiences imprint on us, and how the way in which our family, in particular, mom and dad, related to us, and what we ended up doing with that stays with us as a kind of relational blueprint. It's like a constellation of strategies, behaviors, and aptitudes that allowed us to relate and regulate and connect in the midst of all sorts of environments throughout our childhood. And if those environments were really amazing and we had really loving, responsive parents, then the attachment that we developed is one of a sense that we're free to be who we are, that we're going to get the love and care that we need while we are who we are, and that the world is this beautiful, loving, connected, responsive place. To the degree to which we didn't get that, our attachment system will develop a certain approach, a certain way of interpreting and feeling life that tells a kind of story that helps us navigate the life that's there. So if mom and dad were more unavailable, we will develop an attachment that figures out how to live where the people that are close to me are not that available. We don't like it. We actually feel it as a place of pain and distress because we're relational creatures. But we're also able to adapt and develop a capacity to be somehow okay in spite of that lack of that core need of responsiveness and care. And, you know, if our parents are really kind of involved, oh, we can't see me. So Jessica, I just don't know why I can't adjust that. Let's just try. I'm just going to continue. Just trust that I'm here and I look great. So again, the attachment system is highly adaptive. It's very sophisticated. It starts pre-verbal, which means our sense of our body, our sense of our emotional world, all of those aspects of the relational system develop before we have words for it, which is why so much of the kind of intellectual approach, like reading a book or listening to a podcast or even kind of talk therapy, fails to get to the heart of healing attachment because it needs to be embodied. We need to live and feel these experiences. We need to be with our bodies. We need to be with our emotional world and learn how to relate while these things are going on, which is why I have a bit of a critique of what's often referred to as the trauma-informed approach to therapy or to healing, because so much of it is about a regulated nervous system. And in the early stages of healing in particular, if we're used to being highly dysregulated, then figuring out ways to have spaces that support us in regulating, having tools to help our system regulate, that's all really good and helpful. But as we start to get deeper into the healing journey, we actually have to face and feel the very experiences and states where the wounds first occurred. So it's just important for us to recognize that we have this blueprint. It's highly malleable, but it requires that we start to show up in a way that has more room for the difficulties, the pains, the discomforts, the dysregulation in which the wounds occurred. And one of the most powerful ways to do that is something that my mom used to call creating spaces where we're safe to feel unsafe. And that's why something like a workshop or a therapy session or a coaching session or a retreat is a powerful opportunity, because if you can start to lean into these deeper pains and fears while you're being held, you can start to rewrite the stories and rewrite the wiring around insecure attachment and just long-standing wounds that get in the way of the love that you want. So I like to look through the lens of these two core needs. This is not me that created this. I've been doing some adaptation of it, but Gabor Mate speaks about these needs, the need of attachment and the need of authenticity. And I'll get into a little bit more detail about each of them, just so they make a bit more sense. As we go, if you have questions, if you have things you don't agree with, no problem. If you want to get into things that are a little bit more detailed at the end, we'll have time for that. Okay, so attachment and authenticity. Authenticity can be thought of as a fundamental human need rooted in agency. It refers to our capacity to be ourselves and to live from what is real for us, rather than organizing our lives around performance, adaptation, self-suppression, something other than just being who and what we are. When authenticity is compromised, people may still function, but they rarely feel whole, at ease, or internally aligned. And I think we all have a sense, whether it's consistent or whether we have these little kind of moments of clarity, of how and where we've been true to ourselves and how and where we haven't. And there's often regret attached when we miss the mark around how we knew we wanted to be or how we knew we wanted to show up. That tends to be a signal that we just weren't being true to ourselves. We weren't being authentic. And I've broken authenticity down into two primary kind of constituents. So I think there's the authenticity of being, and this is fundamentally about resting into and simply relaxing as who and what we are. And oftentimes we're so used to doing things out of an inauthentic place that being authentic feels awkward, like just being who we are, because we've filled the space of authenticity with suppression or performance. And then the other aspect of authenticity is the expression of our true self. And one actually has to precede the other. We can't express ourselves authentically if we're not being who and what we are. And so, and I look at these as actually kind of feminine and masculine dynamics. So the being is more the feminine, just like the release of control, of guidance, of trying, the total relaxation into being. And then the expressing being more on the masculine side. We don't have to get into anything about like gender or anything like that. It's just the qualities of that resonate with me. And that as we express ourselves from a true place, we feel satisfied and fulfilled. There's something inherently fulfilling about being true and then expressing that truth. The challenge that we face is that as we grow up, our true self is not always received well. And this is where the attachment side of our needs come in. I see that attachment is spelled wrong there. If we don't get the love and care that we need in the form of attachment in being ourselves, we actually get to a very difficult and painful choice as a child. We start to recognize, wow, who I really am, how I really feel, how I want to naturally express myself is not welcome here. It's not okay here, or even worse, I'm punished for that. And that's where the child starts to make the choice of, I'm going to be different than I naturally am. I'm not going to just accept that I am as I am. I'm going to change who and what I am. I'm going to change how I express who and what I am so that I can actually have a more cohesive relationship with my caregivers. And this is what almost every human being is walking around with some version of. A distorted self, a distorted way of expressing ourselves that we learned so that we could have the closeness, connection, and intimacy that we so deeply wanted. And that's why having healthy people in our lives is so powerful for our healing. We need people to reflect to us that we matter, that we're consequential, that our needs matter, that our inner world matters. And if we don't have that, it's extremely difficult to develop it on our own. So we're going to get into a little bit more about like kind of self-parenting or reparenting, but I think this lens of attachment and authenticity as our core needs is helpful. And what we find when we both have a sense that we can be ourselves and express ourselves in a full way, and that in doing so we're still going to have the closeness and connection that we want with the people close to us, we start to develop a natural sense of balance, safety, play, and creativity. This is like if you've ever seen a happy child that has friends around, they feel safe. And because of that sense of safety and connectivity, they explore. They do creative things. They play, they roughhouse, they hurt themselves, and then they return to their home base. I'm going to get into a little bit about sort of the what's called the attachment cycle. So as we start to explore our world, we naturally run into difficulties. So the attachment cycle is the dynamic where if the baby has all their needs met, they tend to be in a fairly connected, regulated state. But inevitably, the child or the baby doesn't have what they need. That might be they're too cold, they're too warm, their diaper needs changing, they need to eat, they want skin-to-skin contact, they want connection, they want feedback from their caregiver. And when any of those important needs don't get met, the baby's natural intelligence is to dysregulate, to outwardly express their inner state, which is there's some needs not getting met here. I am not able to meet those needs on my own, so I am going to express this unmet need through distress so that my caregiver can hear and respond to me. And ideally, my caregiver is regulated enough and able to take care of themselves enough so that they have the bandwidth to provide care and regulation for me. This is the point in our attachment development where there's a regulate for requirement. In other words, the baby on their own is not able to self-regulate around most of their needs. If the caregiver is even moderately consistent with responsive meeting of those needs, the child develops what they call secure attachment. The research shows us that about 50% of people are securely attached. I'm not sure about that research, but there's some threshold that they've decided on that says half of the population is securely attached. And the 3 primary insecure attachment styles take up the other 50%. Now, again, I like models and metaphors, again, to allow us to see things with more clarity, to allow us to have more of a sense of intuition about the nature of what's going on around attachment and healing and growth. And I found this model from Australia. It's called the Circle of Security, and I love the way they talk about it. It's very much aligned with what I'm saying here, and I wanted to share a little bit about it with you, and you can go and read more if you want, and I'm happy to provide some more resources for anyone that's curious. The idea of the Circle of Security is that if things are consistent and held and well cared for, the child will have this natural desire and inclination to explore and express themselves in their environment. And that's the secure base. When I know that home base is solid and consistent, I feel more inclined, more safe, more inspired to explore my world. And if we think about the attachment cycle happening in concentric circles, as I explore my world, I'm going to get hot, I'm going to get cold, I'm going to get hungry, I'm going to get thirsty, I'm going to skin my knee, I'm going to bonk my head, I'm going to have a conflict with a friend. Whatever happens out there where I feel hurt and dysregulated, what's a child going to do when they feel hurt or dysregulated, especially early on? Maybe get in the chat. Any ideas? What do you think a child does when they feel hurt, dysregulated, things feel unsafe, unstable? What does a young child do? Yeah. Yeah, they go back to home base. And so they actually make a differentiation between home base, which is more the structural, more the masculine side, to the safe haven. When I want love and care, when I want to be nurtured, I go back to home base, which especially early on is mama. It's not because dad isn't important, it's just that mom represents a certain archetype of care and love and need for the child. And dad plays his role, especially later on, and especially for boys. But, we can get into some of those conversations later. Now, as the child does this, there's a secure home base, they explore their environment, they become dysregulated and hurt, they go back to home base. If that's consistently enough of the love and care that they want and need, what happens is the space within which they want to explore expands. And I know, like, if we've had kids in our life, if we've raised children, or if we have been around kids, you know that some kids are much more courageous, some kids are much more kind of risk-taking, some kids are much more risk-averse. And here's the metaphor that I want us to think about. What would it, like, if we think about children as these, immature but very intelligent creatures, if home base is not safe, and I don't want to limit my capacity to explore my reality, my world, what might a child start to do? If the home base I was given isn't that great, what would I start to do as I develop the capacity to do so? So just think about what would a smart organism, what would a smart human do if they start to feel my home base isn't so great? What could I do? I'll give you guys a minute. So what we do as human beings, and this is true, all of us, it's true of all of us, we'll start to build our own home base. What can I do? Where can I go? Yeah, they find a substitute, and they build a substitute. What can I do? How can I be? Where can I go to get at least some of the things that I want and need? And when a child is dysregulated and in distress and in pain, and mom or dad can't provide what they need, almost anything that helps them feel better, feel safer, feel more connected, will be something they'll orient to. And so the way I think about this is like, if you look at this circle of security image, somewhere away from what is meant to be secure home base or safe haven, which is mom and dad, I start to build my own home base. And that could be certain ways of being, that could be certain ways of expressing myself, that could be using certain activities and eventually certain substances. And when I look at the pathology of addiction and mental illness, that's actually what I see. I see those things as each person's particular home base that they built to help manage and mitigate the pain of life in the absence of the love, care, and connection that they most longed for. And then we can start to think, okay, each of us has our own home base, right? Through the lens of attachment, avoidant attachment is its own kind of home base. It has its own logic and strategy. Anxious attachment is its own home base. It has its own logic and strategy. And when those home bases are our default, in other words, we've done them enough where that's how I operate in the world, it will be unconscious to me. It's like a fish registering that they're breathing water. That's always been that way, and so this is just the way it is. We don't see how we've built a kind of false home base that fails to nurture and care for ourselves in the way that we most wanted from mom and dad. And so that means that the healing journey, it's not just a matter of orienting ourselves towards healthier things. It also involves the deconstruction of a home base that served us, that helped us survive, that helped us manage when things were extremely painful and difficult. And one of the ways I like to think about this is you think about how we feel life. You know, I was talking with someone really recently about how a certain dynamic in their partner that they knew wasn't a big deal, but how when the partner said that thing, their nervous system was on fire. It's like their sensitivity and their interpretation of that little bit of stimulus is so strong and so uncomfortable. They have that particular aspect of, this is an equalizer in case anyone who's not into like sound or music. This it boosts and lowers certain signals in the auditory spectrum. And our home base does that. It's a kind of filter and mechanism that helps us feel life in very particular ways. If dad stomped around when he was drinking and he was really volatile when he was drinking, vibration and stomping sounds will register in our system like intense danger, even if it's just someone in the kitchen at the restaurant that we're at putting the dishes down. There's nothing we can do about that reaction in the moment. But what we can do is we can start to engage these states of being, these states of our system, with more curiosity, with more compassion, and with more skill over time. Okay, this is a story I was going to tell. We started a bit late. Am I going to tell it? Okay, I'll quickly tell it. A lot of times, and again, this is strongly embedded in the kind of a trauma-informed care, trauma-informed therapy world. I'm not saying we don't want to be trauma-informed. I just think we can go too far down that road in a way that's not honoring of how powerful and strong human beings are. And that is that there's often something referred to as the window of tolerance, which is essentially how much difficulty, pressure, complexity, stress can I be with and can show up for me where I'm still able to kind of be me. I can still think about things, I can work things out, I can make good decisions. Basically, what they call my executive functioning is still online. That's often referred to as the window of tolerance. And again, when I hear a lot of people talk about the window of tolerance, they talk about it as if it's this static thing, or that we develop skills and then eventually with skills, my window of tolerance grows, which is true. But there's another way my window of tolerance can grow that isn't so slow and doesn't take years and isn't about developing skills. And here's the metaphor that I like to use. I want you to imagine a man who, for whatever reason, has a massive aversion to cold. He doesn't like feeling cold. He doesn't like doing cold. People who go out in the wintertime, he doesn't understand. People who go skiing, he doesn't understand. People who are into cold plunges, he's like, forget that. He does not like cold. And this man also has a child. And this child is his whole life. He loves this child like nothing else. And one day he's walking along a boardwalk in the cold next to a lake that's frozen over. And somehow his son slips and falls into the lake. I want someone to tell me what happens to this man's aversion to cold when his son falls into the lake. What happens? Yeah. If he loves that child more than life itself, his aversion to cold disappears in that instant. There's no thought process. He's not thinking about how uncomfortable it's going to be. All he's thinking about is, I got to save my son. And so this is not a hand wave. This is not like me pretending there's some magic wand that makes all of our issues go away. That's not what I'm suggesting. What I am suggesting is we live in, like, not even arguably, objectively the easiest, most affluent, safest time for almost all human beings who have ever existed. That doesn't mean we haven't experienced pain and difficulty and fear and terror, and that's all true. But relative to like a survival context, things are more comfortable than they've ever been. And I think we have unknowingly over the last several decades built an orientation to discomfort and pain that it's wrong and bad and it shouldn't happen. And I think that's a terrible orientation to pain and difficulty. And it sets us up. If we believe that when discomfort gets to a certain place, I just have no capacity to face it, I have no capacity to operate in the midst of that kind of discomfort, then we've just closed, we kind of collapsed our agency and our window of tolerance into an area that's way smaller than it actually is. And so what I'll encourage everyone that's here with me to think about is, what is a context for my life that would more readily and consistently expand my sense of my window of tolerance? What do I care about or love enough that I would be willing to face and feel more of what's hard about my life? And this is something that, like, I'm working with clients or I have people in a workshop. These are things that we dive into more deeply. Today, we're just going to get a chance to kind of scratch the surface, but hopefully everyone in the call right now has a sense of what that might be. What could I start to relate to in my life in a consistent way that reminds me how beautiful life is, how powerful I am, and how much I'm able to be with if I have the right kind of context for being with it. So I'm going to briefly talk about what I created around, I call it a 7-stage attachment timeline. This is sort of like the sequence of things that happen in the context of our attachment development. And then I'll move into more of the specifics of my model. And then I would love to engage everyone here in some dialogue or even some work around attachment wounds and how they might more readily be addressed and healed. So we have like the happenings of life, and in terms of attachment, we might have like a core attachment wound. This might be an acute wound where dad goes to prison, or mom passes away, or maybe there's sexual abuse, or like something major that happens that just is like there was life before that and life after that kind of moment around trauma. And then there's also what they call chronic trauma. And so that's like recurring moments or experiences of unmet needs around love and care. And there's so many of them, and they're to a degree to which my development can't unfold properly or well. And then the second part of this particular timeline that I created involves core belief. And this is where agency starts to be involved. At a certain developmental level, we can start to develop beliefs about ourselves and about life. And these beliefs, at their best, orient us to how beautiful life is, how meaningful life is, and how much opportunity we have to create something beautiful through our agency. But in the absence of consistent, loving, caring adults, the core belief tends to orient around, what can I believe that helps me make sense of the pain and disconnection I feel? And so the core belief that people tend to be left with is something about not being good enough. Like, there's something wrong with me, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable. So I'd love if anyone has any core beliefs that they can relate to that are different than that. Or if that one hits the mark for you, feel free to write it in the chat. But I'd love to hear from you. What are some core beliefs that you could relate to? Like, what did you start to believe about the things that were most difficult and painful in your early life that were not nice, they weren't good for you or about you, but in some way what they did was they allowed you to go, that's why. That's why dad is like this. That's why mom is like that. That's why this happened to me. That's why this keeps happening to me. So the core belief plays the role of allowing us to feel clear about something painful that in a certain way allows us to move past it. It's a bypass, but it works, and you can see why core belief is so compelling, why the negative core belief is so compelling. Yeah, so children are to be seen and not heard. I know that one. I've seen that one. I have to earn love. So that's where we start to learn a kind of performance of self, that more than just me is needed for the love that I want to show up. Yeah, not good enough, not lovable. Okay, so like these, and I'm sure we can all relate to these. These are not exotic to us. These are just the ways in which human beings use our agency around belief to believe something that in at least the short term allows us to go, okay, like I can just move on now because I know I'm just a piece of shit, right? Like, it sounds brutal, but in a certain way, that's how that works. And then, because of our core belief, we start to make certain choices and behaviors that reflect that core belief. So this is where the child that's been speaking up and expressing themselves gets quiet. They're like, oh, if I don't matter, if my voice isn't valid here, why keep trying? So then our choices start to reflect our core belief. And as we continue to make our choices, we get patterns, which means that these choices at a certain point start to run on their own. And then we create a more elaborate story about ourselves. And this essentially is the core belief plus because. And we just iterate a more profound and sort of nuanced version of ourselves through that core belief. So I'm unlovable because, I'm not very smart and I'm never good enough and I make these mistakes and it's too much for people to be around me and da 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 da. And as we tell our story and continue to play out our patterns, eventually it becomes what I call our character. So this is just our whole sense of self that, unless we start to face and feel our inner world, is just our life playing out in front of us, and we're not really at the wheel. Just old pain and old patterns are running the show. And of course, if that's how we operate as a default, then all of that is then reflected in our relational dynamics. The kinds of people that are attracted to us, the kinds of people that we keep around, the way we show up in those relationships, the absence of those relationships, all of that is just a downstream consequence of this attachment timeline. So one thing I want to start with is, most people think of agency as what we do. And of course, I think agency is involved in what we do, but not in the way that we think. A way that I want everyone to start to think about agency, at least what I consider our core agency, is not so much the things we do, but more about how am I being with what is happening right now. And if we can think about our real agency as how much of a yes am I to what's occurring, or how much am I in some way saying no to or resisting what's occurring. And the image is it's called an aperture. There are these blades that open or close on a camera lens. And when the aperture is open, more light is coming through. When the aperture is closed, less light is coming through. And so if we want to think about the light as like the possibility, how much is possible in this moment? The more I say no to what is occurring, the more I'm closing off the possibility of the present moment. The more I'm going to force things down the road or the channel that is most practiced by me. And that's why when we get really upset in life and we kind of shut down and we say, no, I don't want any of this, what tends to happen is whatever we've done most, whatever we are most habituated in, is what will happen when I really shut down from life. So the reason that's important is, as we start to think about healing, it has to include the outside world. It has to include other relationships. But the challenge, and again, this is another critique I have, is like, there's this person online, I'm not even going to tell you who she is or where she's kind of connected to, but when I see her posting, everything is about what's wrong out there. The system, the patriarchy, the bad therapists, the evildoers, the people who perpetrate trauma. Everything is about that. And again, it's not that there's no value in being informed about what's wrong with our world. There's plenty wrong with our world. It's just that if I'm not placing my inner world and my own agency at the heart of what I'm doing and where I'm going in life, I'm wasting so much of what actually heals me, which is me starting to provide the love and care that I didn't get, and slowly but surely learning how to include other people in my life that are ready, willing, and able to do that with me. And it sounds so simple, but it's so challenging because, it requires that we don't go back to our home base when things feel scary. It requires that we choose to find a new, more vulnerable, less established home base that can start to reinstate in us the sense of life is good, life is safe, I'm connected, things can go well for me. Yeah, so Lizzie, where attention goes, energy flows, for sure. So we have to balance. In some ways, there's a kind of negativity that happens when we experience trauma. We haven't figured out a way to really have our life be the way we want. of course we're going to feel kind of a heaviness or a lowness around that. It's okay. We can't make that wrong and try to avoid that. But where we start to really become like empowered agents in our healing and change is when we stop using what's wrong out there in the world as a distraction from coming home to ourselves and starting to care for ourselves and love ourselves well. If we're not yet loving ourselves well, we really shouldn't be talking about all of the terrible things out there in the far, far world. I need to address what's going on in front of me and within me. If I can start doing that, like that's the road to real healing. So challenging, Sherry, for sure. So I want to share with you an ultra simplified but coherent approach to how we can begin to be and express ourselves in a way that naturally integrates our past. I call it transformative communication, and it has 5 main stages. In my work, I go into much more detail about it in the attachment retreat that I'm doing in April in Hawaii. I'll go into much more detail about it. Kadiri's in our call. She'll be there with us in Hawaii. And I just want to talk briefly about these, and then I want to make sure we save some time for anyone that has questions or wants to engage something in a more material way. So, the first thing that is needed for any conscious change to happen is we need to be present. And what I mean by that is that I am aware that I'm here, and I am somehow aware I'm the space within which my experience is happening. And so there's lots of ways we can get present. We can use breath techniques. We can use somatic awareness. We can, tapping is a way to get more present. Whatever your tool is fine. But eventually what you'll discover is presence is not something you choose to be. It's more, what quality of presence am I choosing right now? Like now is always the only thing that's ever happening. So it's not really possible to not be present. It's just I can be present in a way that doesn't give me access to my full possibility space. So first, presence. That's about resting into authenticity, allowing things to be as they are in spite of the discomfort that might be there, allowing the other to be as they are in spite of what you might not agree with or enjoy about how they're being. And if we can get to a place of even just a little bit more presence than we had a moment ago, we've just expanded our possibility space beyond the norm. That means change is possible. When we move from presence, we go into something I called attunement. Attunement means I'm going to begin to feel more fully and more deeply what's going on in me. It includes physical sensations, it includes emotion, it includes whatever's spinning or swirling in my mind around memory or image or thought. And as I become more spacious and attuned to what I'm feeling, there's a natural discernment that becomes possible. And the way I would describe this discernment is I start to feel the difference in the levels of value of the possibilities that are present. So you start to feel, oh, I could close off here. I could call them an asshole. I could say that they're wrong. I could shut down and stonewall. I could criticize them. I could do all these things. But actually, as I make more room and I'm more attuned to what's going on here, I actually feel the value of speaking a little bit to what I see is difficult for them and sharing about what's difficult for me holds more value. And like in an objective way, sharing that holds more value than something reactive. And if I can get to a place of discernment that I'm actually clear that this possibility matters more than these other ones, that's our invitation to then be expressed in that truth that we're knowing. So the discernment is about what's the deepest or highest value truth and possibility that's here, and can my behavior and my expression be in service to that? And the interaction is about a commitment to staying in a process with someone where you both can do that over time. And in spite of the fact that this looks really simple and can include incredible complexity, this distills what so many of the models lose, which is like when you got scripts and there's 18 things to remember, and when they do this, you do that, and you don't really need any of that stuff. It can be helpful down the road once you get more grounded. But if you can just focus on a handful of things that you know guide you to a better place around how you relate and express yourself, that makes the biggest difference. And so the other thing that I love, who knows the hero's journey? Who has a sense, like if you know Joseph Campbell is probably the most recognized kind of originator of the hero's journey. If you have maybe a better question, Does anyone have a favorite book or story or movie? Something that just like the hair on the back of your neck stands up and you cry and like it just moves you. Does anyone have a favorite movie, book, something? I'll give you a moment. Okay, Tuesdays with Maury. Anyone else? The Four Agreements. So with favorite stories, what we will almost invariably find is a journey that that person goes on, that character. And the stories that we tend to be most drawn to are stories that reflect our story. And so there are going to be elements of difficulty or struggle or obstacle that the character faces that resonate with us. And the story of the hero's journey is that somehow there's a call to adventure. In other words, we leave behind something familiar and safe for something that is more alive. And again, I'm just going to keep weaving these metaphors together. Like the alternate home base we built is the ordinary world of the hero's journey. That thing that we built, that we painstakingly put together, that helped us survive, that helped us feel okay, that helped us feel grounded when we felt least grounded, is the thing we need to say goodbye to fully and sincerely engage in the hero's journey. And that along the hero's journey, as I leave this ordinary world, there's a threshold I cross, there's trials, there's allies and mentors that I'll come across that can help me along my way. And then there's what they call the approach, which is I start to recognize that it's time for me to face, feel, and integrate the pieces I've been avoiding. And that's usually where fear and consideration come up. It's usually where excuses come up. It's usually where our relapse comes up. I started down a road of, in the world of addiction, they call it recovery. I started down a road of recovery or healing or growth, and some part of me was like, no, it's too much, I can't. And then we shirk our responsibility, we step off the path. Now, part of me believes that some of those relapses are part of the journey. Like almost no one steps on the path and just unwaveringly walks the path till the end. I think it happens, but it's very rare. Most of us have to make some mistakes along the way to then get more deeply grounded in what we're about and why it matters and how we're committed to walking the path. And then there's the ordeal, which is often referred to as the dark cave. This is when we make room for and allow for the thing that was most painful, that we're most afraid of, to come up into the conscious space and be re-experienced from a different place with a bigger container and with more openness and heartfulness. When we engage the ordeal to a place of completion, we get the elixir. This is like the secret magic ingredient of what we couldn't get if we hadn't experienced the trauma in the first place. So this is another piece that I think is often missed. Sometimes in the world of therapy and therapeutics, they refer to it as post-traumatic growth. Healing isn't about becoming what you were before you were hurt. Healing and integrating is about becoming so much more than you were through the proper integration of what was painful and difficult. And then there's the return. And in the hero's journey, the return is where we bring the elixir back to the ordinary world, back to the life that we used to know. We're different. We're more whole. And not only do we then get to transform the ordinary world, but we get to share our gift and our elixir with others. And we see this everywhere in the human condition, in the human journey, in human community. It's just happening over and over and over again. Now, right now we're in a bit of a dystopia because of technology and social media and AI and just where globally we're at with sort of geopolitical stuff and economic stuff. And we want and need community and connection more than ever, and it feels less available than it ever has. So I think it's partly why I feel so inspired to keep refining and developing this model, because I want to be able to share it, and I want to be able to inspire and invite and work with people to really figure this stuff out. And then once you have it, you can go out into the world and make all this stuff happen. And humanity needs it. Like we really we need this right now. So that's the main sort of skeleton that I wanted to get across. As I'm writing this book, the model I'm using, or the model I'm creating, is called relational intelligence. I'm going to have more of the elements and the kind of concepts within the model that I'll share in future sessions. So if you liked this and you want to keep coming back to the conversation, please do. There's lots of ways to stay in touch with me. Social media, I have an email list. I just launched a new website, and I got a bunch of programs happening through this winter and spring. So for those of you that are on the call, if you want to throw your email, if we're not already connected and you want, throw your email in the chat. And right now, I'll just invite anyone that wants to kind of jump on to ask questions verbally, or anyone that wants to get in the chat to ask questions. Now is your opportunity. Thanks for being here with me. It's been a pleasure. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, and I'm glad that I broke the ice. Thanks, Sharon. So yeah, now is the time to, you can just share how this was for you. That's good feedback for me. I want to keep developing and refining it. And you can also share like a personal experience, or a difficulty from childhood, or a relational dynamic that's hard. And I'm happy to just give, I'm not going to get too deep into it just because of the call and the nature of how much time we have, but happy to provide just maybe a little bit of a nudge or a little nugget that might help. Thanks, Lizzie. Yeah, I love that feedback. So Lizzie said, felt like you were speaking directly to me. And maybe next time I'll look into the camera. I was looking at my slides, but yeah, looking into the camera is good. Nice to have you with me.
Hi, this is Jess.
Hey, Jess.
Everything that you said, of course, resonated with me as well. I started crying a lot, especially when you were talking about what a young child needs to feel secure. And you and I have talked about your belief that you think a person can heal from this, obviously. I still have my doubts because of all the years of, that's what I've said, like, what's my question? How long, like, if you've been firing a certain groove in your brain, the same thoughts for over 60 years, how do you, I have to keep having the same new thoughts so they get built in, but a groove of 60 years compared to something new, it seems like the old overpowers the new.
Yeah, I mean, 60 years of entrainment and habit is not nothing. It has a reality in us, and it doesn't just evaporate. And, I would say this is what life is. This is what life does. Is it differentiates and then it integrates. Differentiates and integrates. Differentiates and integrates. It's what life has been doing for 4 billion years on this planet. And we can play a role in how, this is beautiful, like, I believe our main dysfunction is dissociation. We become not just differentiated, but dissociated from the broader reality that we're a part of. That's the real pain. That's the deepest pain that we have, is that we're disconnected from the truth of what we are and the truth of what life is. And the dissociation, again, like that core belief I was talking about, is a way that we manage and mitigate the pain. To associate in the midst of a life that's so full of pain is hard. And if we don't, and that's, I believe the role that relationship plays is not just providing the love and care, but someone who's connected to the meaning of their life is naturally transmitting why we would stay open in the midst of pain. They're showing us how and why that matters. And that's why our close relationships are such incubators for, but also disturbers of our own sense of equilibrium and well-being. So, in the question I hear you asking about, what do we do if we have this incredibly long-standing habit of life and relationship not really going well? And again, I think sorry, I just saw a comment in the chat. The thing that is required is we need to trust something before we have experience of it. And that's partly why I think, you were drawn to me, and why the work that we're doing is supporting, is that you see or sense in me something about why it's worth staying open, why it's worth showing up, why it's worth doing hard things in spite of the pain. And the more you stay with your intuition about that, what you know is good about that, especially when we're not connecting, the more you will start to change. And it'll be a long road. Like, I used to work with at-risk kids and kids living on the street, and sometimes the professionals that I worked with would tell the kids things like, oh yeah, you just do this and that, and it's all going to be great. And I hated that. I hated when they told these kids that maybe have been addicted to drugs for a few years and have, like really done some nasty stuff to themselves and to the people that they care about, that giving them some idea that it's an easy road is the way to get them motivated. And I don't like that. I like to tell people it's all beautiful and worth it, and it's going to be really challenging. And it's not about trying to find the easy road. It's about staying connected to a reason to walk the road that can carry you through the journey. And you have some of those things. It's just they don't always feel like enough for you. Does that feel true?
Yeah.
So I don't know how much we can get into today, right now, that's going to like break you through that. But if there's anything else that feels clear to you, say it. And then I also want to leave a little bit of room for anyone else that wants to jump in and chat.
Mm-hmm.
So anything else, Jess?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Fine.
Thanks for checking in. So does anyone else want to get on? Just call in and say something verbally? Yeah, and I just saw that comment from Sherry. Sherry says, I'm just coming to the point in my journey where the stories no longer have relevance like they did. It is like the record is now boring, and yet still meeting the deeper programmed patterns to undo them. The work is real, for sure. Yeah, and some days are going to feel like we're really getting it and we're on a roll and we have the wind at our back, and some days are going to feel like, we just landed right where we started, and has any of the work really done anything? And the more we find something we can relate to on those tougher days that reminds us of the truth, yeah, the better off we are. So we got a little more time if anyone wants to jump into the chat and ask, or to call in and get verbal, even, show your camera. Let me see you. It's all available. Jess says, I hope I work this out because I don't want to do this again if there are more lives. And we've talked a little bit about life after death. Yeah. I do think these patterns repeat until they get they get sorted, but not in the way where it's like you again remembering that you did it and now you're doing it again. Okay. So I'm curious about the, do you see, so Kadiri's just asking about jumping on, but says her computer won't let her. Is there a button that says call in and that's not working, or you don't see that button? Oh, there you are.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey, friend.
Hi.
Nice to see you again.
Good to see you. And the question that I didn't read to click on was, am I wearing headphones? So
Okay.
it tripped me up. But I have a question about repair, and it's currently in my situation right now, so it's very alive for me. And I feel that it must be a pattern or a place where I glitch in different relationships. But so I'm going to try to get it out. So when there's a conflict and both people care about each other and they want to repair, often their timing can be different. And I've found that I get hung up a lot, even in the scheduling of that, which I feel are other feelings, but negotiating, even setting that time, causes my demand avoidance to kick in. And I'm just like, forget it, I don't want to do it. But my heart knows that it's important. And then I start to scale back. Well, maybe it can be in writing, not on a text, but like full writing. And that doesn't feel complete. But then there's also a big part of me that knows or is sensing that it's not right timing for me to have the conversation, or maybe it's the other person. But that alone becomes such a issue, and it kind of overshadows even the chance of repair, possibly, or maybe not the chance, but how soon it will be.
And so,
So
like, I hear you talk. There's a pattern where this has happened more than a couple times, and so it feels like something that is. Whenever there's a pattern, we know that something's calling for our care and attention in a different way than we've done in the past. And so, what's
yeah.
your sense of what, first I think is good. What's your need in that? Like when you know that it's time to repair and there isn't a kind of as much availability or responsiveness from the other, what does that touch in you? What need is not being met in that?
A connection and really feeling cared for.
So that, like, I
And
heard the word consideration and
y-
care.
yeah, and connection.
Yeah.
It's always a C word for me. And in this situation's opposite from my last, where I'm the one that's not ready to communicate. So I flipped scripts to, like every other relationship, dissolving seems to bring out an opposite right now.
So
So
so currently you're in one where they're more kind of on the hey, it's time to repair here, and you're not feeling it. Um, is that brand new? Is that like that rarely happens, or that it flip flops back and forth for you?
it depends. It depends. It flips a lot. It depends on how I'm feeling met or if the energy of the situation. But for certain situations, I think it depends on the person and the dynamic. And this is just like a professional dynamic, not even more than that. I mean, friendship too, um, but not too intimate, really.
Yeah.
So it's curious that it's coming up in this way, and I don't feel ready to confront it or handle it. But a lot that's playing into is I can sense that it feels like it's going to be a fight, and if it's going to be a fight, I'd rather wait. So I don't want to fight.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Which is like a very reasonable self-preservation instinct, right? Like, okay, this is volatile. Like, I don't want to touch it until it feels less volatile. And what's likely, if you look back, like, are the recurring patterns in adult life are almost invariably imprints of patterns early on. So if early on there was a lot of chaos and a lot of unpredictability and a lot of like a lack of safety, then this dynamic would register particularly in a particularly uncomfortable way for you. And so then the question becomes, how much of that is just this is what happens in life and everyone's got to deal with it, and you happen to have like a like a radar for it that's really turned on to 10, right? Which is part of the story.
Right.
But then the other
Yeah.
part of the story is how much of it is that you're choosing people where this happens more frequently than would normally happen for most people, right? Is like when you think about how you curate the people close to you, do you have a sense that per capita there's just higher chaos and volatility in these people?
I have noticed that, and that's also, I think, part of this dissolving or changing chapters in a life, in my life, and I'm in a chapter change, and I'm not planning to bring that person into my next if everything stays the way it is or how it's been. So that definitely plays in, and those are both great questions to sit with. And I specifically like as you teach and I'm really wanting to like have skills and tools to like parse out that certain part about where the needs are when there's conflict, but how does I don't want that person to not feel cared for. And
Right.
so I think my pushback or my absence is affecting them in that way too. And I still want to show care even though I'm not willing to do that yet. But specifically, it is making more. I'm not sure if I'm at the point too to just have the conversation because I'm tired of negotiating the time. But I want us to both be present and show up in a way where we can at least share and not injure each other during it. And I feel self-protective from them.
Yeah, and like I hear you speaking to it's the or one of the most challenging aspects of doing relationship well, which is how do I accurately and properly include the needs of myself and the needs of them so that I'm not self-abandoning and I'm also not disregarding them and their needs. And for most of us, we tend to lean one way or the other more. In other words, some people are more self-oriented and will drop the ball with the other person's needs more than would be good for a healthy relationship. And other people are more willing to abandon themselves in the interest of providing care for the other. And neither of them are great. And if we see, like this is what I would encourage as homework, if you see that you are more one way or the other, a big part of your path of healing involves shifting to the side you're less used to, even if it makes things a little bit less comfortable or shaky or painful.
Am I hearing you say sample the opposite or just over to the other side a little?
If you so I mean, do you want to talk about it? Like which side of that spectrum do you fall on?
Well, I definitely fall on I know I'm going to be okay, so I'll sacrifice for the other person.
I'll figure it out. I'll make sure
I
that they get taken
martyr,
care
I
of
fall
first.
into the martyr category.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So part of your journey, not forever, but for a time, if you're clear, be clear. But if you're not clear, err on the side of taking care of yourself first.
I appreciate hearing that right now. And I've been working on a alignment over loyalty, and it totally will give me better discernment with that too. So
And one of the reasons you don't is because you don't trust they're going to be okay, either on their own or they won't be okay with you if you actually pull some of the energy back and take care of yourself. And the reality is, if someone is healthy and able to hold themselves, and someone close to them says, "Hey, I actually need to kind of create some space and some self-care for myself, and it involves me not really being able to show up for you right now," like they're going to receive that gracefully. So that's just another signal. Like if you're abandoning yourself and giving up what you need for someone that can't hear that you need some space or some time or some self-care, why would you do that?
uh, I don't know how much of that you just intuited, but it's pretty much. I've already asked for that in that way before, and that's why this dissolve is happening. So it plays in. So yes, that is very informative. Thank you.
Thanks for
Yeah.
being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Feels like we're we're creeping to the end. The timing was 8 o'clock Mountain, which is 7 Pacific. So I'll hang out for a little bit longer. If anyone has anything, I'm here. I'm available. Get in the chat or call in. I've been enjoying this. Again, I wish that I was more versed in using Riverside in this way, but just know I'm going to do this bi-weekly for the next few months just to really dial in how I speak about this. And yeah, anyone else that wants to get on the call to chat, please do so.
I have a question. It's
Mm.
Jessica. Hi. My very, very close friends for 30 to 50 years that I don't live near, they know that I have an attachment disorder. And they accept it, and they know that I'm difficult, and they know the traits, and they're solid enough that they don't react, they don't, they accept, they love me in spite of. So I have people up here in my life who I've not told I have an attachment disorder, and they tell me anyway they don't like labels. I don't like labels either, but I got diagnosed properly. It wasn't like off kilter. So how do I know when it's appropriate to tell someone that I think is a close friend, who I've known over a year, who says, oh, the divine will take care of it, or, oh, you're making too big a deal out of it, or, oh, it happened 60 some odd years ago, so you should be past it. Like all that shit that people say. So I don't know who I can be real with. Only people I feel I can be real with is you, a few, very few friends, and 12-step.
Can you repeat the question if there's something like there's a couple
the
pieces in there? I just want to get clear on what you're asking.
The question is, how do I know when I should or could tell someone in my life that I have an attachment disorder? Let's say they say, you're clingy, Jess. Well, then at what point do I say, and do I tell people at this point, or is it so personal and private I shouldn't be disclosing it? Because my behavior at times is off the wall, and people see that, but they don't understand why, and it gets diminished.
Yeah. My take is I wouldn't get too occupied with how it is for them. In that case, like this is something personal about yourself. It's something that is challenging for you. It's something that is going to come up in the relationship. And in a way, it's part of your attempt to care for the relationship so that they don't take it personally or they get that there's some other things going on. And I think you need to discern who is ready, willing, and able to hear it, who is not. And, if you're going to have anything other than just a very surface relationship with someone, at some point it's going to come up. And I think it's okay to bring it up. And what I would recommend moving forward is, can you get to a place where it's not a big deal to talk about it?
It's not a big deal for me to talk.
Right, but you take on some of other people's thought that it is a big deal or that they don't want to talk about it.
I don't take it on out of nowhere. They tell me.
Right,
Oh,
but you
raise
don't have
your
to.
frequency.
Sure. But
Frequency.
it's like I wouldn't have much more to say to someone if that's how they responded to me saying, "Hey, just so you know, like this is a bit of like what's going on for me, and this shows up for me in this way and that way, and I just wanted you to know because I like you and I like spending time, and I just think it's fair that you have a bit more information around this piece for me." If their response to that is raise your vibration, man, we're probably not hanging out again.
I hear you.
So, but and that's not a prescription.
No, I know.
Just-
So then that triggers the abandonment issues again,
Totally.
because even if I'm the one walking away, I might be walking away because of a comment similar to that. Then I'm left to myself again, right?
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
brings up, how much do I compromise myself so this person remains in my life?
Yes, and I would be. It's tough. It's a very tough combination of choices that you have, and I think there's enough people out there that really love and care about authenticity that's the direction you should be consistently moving in.
Mm-hmm.
More honesty and compassion for yourself, more openness and transparency and vulnerability and truth with others, and people who want to show up for that, like really foster those connections, and people who don't, let them go.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. So Sherry, you'd mentioned you want to get on, but your audio often doesn't work. I'm happy to try it if you want, and otherwise we'll probably call it a night. Sherry, do you see the call in button? So Sherry may have left us. Okay, my friends, I'm going to call it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for being with me. Oh, it is a process to get on. Okay, do you want me to wait? Do you want to try to give it a go? Okay. So, I don't see you yet. Okay, we'll call it a night. I'll keep doing this every couple of weeks. I think you shared your. Yeah, thanks, Kaderi. Great to see you. I think you shared your email with me, so I'll stay in touch in those ways. And yeah, till next time, wish you well. Thanks, everyone. Wishing you the best.